and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network, where we reflect on Wildbow's most fetching work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse, and that's Elliot, I suppose. Oh. Sorry, okay, so let me reveal what's going on here in this episode. Before we started, actually, about a day and a half ago, I got Elliot to send me a bunch of contextless voice clips. Now, he hasn't even read these two chapters that we're about to talk about, so he just sent a bunch of voice clips. I think the only thing that he knew was that we'd be having a Gilkey interlude, so there'll be some fun stuff as we get into these. I've tried to work them in naturally so we can feel like Elliot is still here with us in some way. But yeah, we'll see how we go. So yeah, we're coming to you live in the Discord. If you're in the Discord, hi everybody. It's just me, except for Elliot's voice soundboard, because of course Elliot is moving house at the moment. But next week we'll be back to a regular episode, and then we'll have a few more solo Elliot episodes the week after that. So there'll be some real fun stuff going on. And I guess it's worth noting that as of this week, we have officially passed the word count for Ward.
Take that, you Ward.
So, yep, thanks, Elliot. Yeah, we've officially passed Ward's word count, so we are now the longest by word serial. We've got some stats here for you all. In terms of, like, universe, Parahumans in total is 3.6 million words, whereas the other verse is about 2.9 million, so we're about 700,000 words behind them. But we'll catch up soon, hopefully. And it's next week, actually, is going to be the 3-year anniversary of the first episode of Deep Impact that we ever recorded, which means the 8-year anniversary of the first ever episode of Pact that was recorded. So that's fun. Just, you know, we're smashing milestones here. But let's get into the chapters, shall we? First chapter, playing a part 1511, we're with Lucy. We're in Lucy's head. You know, Lucy, we start and it's, you know, things are the shit is hitting the fan, basically. Lucy is locked into the school and it's attacked by a group of the family men, and the class just kind of, you know, chit-chats and freaks out, etc. And I think the thing from this chapter that or at least from the early part of this chapter that I really, really liked is there's this sequence. I mean, you know, it's Melissa and Bracken's relationship, of course, because I'm really all there for it. There's this bit where, you know, everyone's on their phone and Bracken's like, oh, what's a phone? Or whatever. And Melissa's like, oh, here, check out. This is called a smartphone and it's got apps on it, etc. No, Bracken knows what a phone is. It's just that he doesn't understand the whole concept of some of these apps and all this jazz, I guess. But, you know, Melissa, like, leans kind of, you know, the text doesn't say this, but I use the word nuzzles in my brain. Nuzzles into Bracken as she kind of shows him these apps. And it's delightful. And then Mia's like, oh, I found it. And then Melissa groans because that symbolizes or signifies the end of the opportunity for Melissa to nuzzle into Bracken. And it just is delightful. And I know that, you know, there are obviously, it's a bit of a minefield of potential problems, the relationship between these two. But I also feel like it could be great, right? I really feel like it could be genuinely positive for both of them. I don't know. I'm curious what our live commenters, live listeners in chat think. Like, do you think this is a good idea for these to have a relationship or not? But it's just like, I don't know. It just... it just could go really well, you know? Wildbow points out it is Mia, and Melissa already has negative feelings towards Mia, so it might just be that Mia talks and Melissa is groaning. But I do think there's a bit of, you know, like, Mia's the one who found it before Melissa was able to get the phone open or whatever. Like, I think there's a bit of that in there too. Of course, the app that they use is Karen's Corner, which is classic. There's some real funny stuff, just like little funny bits in the first part of this chapter. There's a bit where their principal gives an announcement, and I swear to God, the principal's name is so close to Principal Suave that when I read it, and every time I read it in my mind, I read it as Principal Suave, even though it's not Suave, it's Principal Sauve, maybe Sauve. But it looks like Principal Suave, and that just made me crack up. And I know that's not really a joke, but I still enjoyed it. Aziza did it says that Mel and Bracken both need to grow up a bit, and I think that's interesting. Like, because I do think a relationship is good for that, right? Like, even though almost certainly because they both are somewhat immature, maybe isn't the right word. Maybe it is, but like inconsiderate, I guess. But like caring about another person and having that other person get upset because of inconsiderate things that you do is a great way for them to realize how inconsiderate they can be at times, right? So I think despite the fact that it might even just naturally be headed for disaster, and maybe it's not, maybe Mel and Bracken, can go the distance or whatever. I don't know. It just feels like it'll be a good kind of like sense check for them, right? Yeah. Tajid says it's too much of a potential disaster for us to not want to see it, which is very true. Like, the fact that it potentially is going to be a disaster is what makes it so appealing as well. But really, I do think that they have a lot in common. Like, they could just get along really well if they are able to, I don't know, soften each other's sharp edges, I suppose. But yeah, so Principal Suave tells everyone to stay indoors, and Lucy obviously doesn't want to do that. She wants to be a hero. We'll get to that in a second. But yeah, so she and Bracken ditch the class and spring into action. Melissa is left behind as the blackguard. And Lucy, we've talked before about how Lucy is the perfect person to kind of help grow Melissa into a valuable member of the team. And we see more of that in this chapter. Yeah, being the blackguard 100% is the perfect role for Melissa. Like, involved a bit to have her, involved enough to have her curiosity hopefully somewhat sated, but not involved enough to hopefully be in too much danger. I think that's a bit blurry which side of the line she'll fall on there, but I think it's a good role for her. And this moment with Bracken, where he just like jams his arm into the door handles as a way to quickly stop the family man's men. God, what a tongue twister! As a way to stop them from getting into the school, is like very interesting. It's very classic Bracken, which is why I think Bracken is so compelling as a character, because he will complain and be annoying and be prickly, the whole time, but he is genuinely willing to help in this situation, willing to be helpful, and putting his body on the line for that, right? If Lucy didn't actively push him out of the way, he was about to have a huge dude charge into the door with his arm in there, and that would have, his arm would have 100% broken from that, right? Like, yeah, that's the thing about Bracken that makes him so compelling and so enjoyable, despite how much of a shitbag he can be, is like, he really does give a shit. He really does, despite how much he wants to pretend that he doesn't. Yeah, Snowdrop's Tiny Fan points out, like, he's in Kennet because he wanted to save his brother from this very shitty, a series of very shitty situations they're in, right? And yeah, like, he's annoying, and he's surly, and he's grumpy, and he's all of the seven dwarves, but he's also altruistic, which is not a seven dwarf, but it should be. He's just, it's just great. I love it. I just love it. It's just very fun. So yeah, Lucy, they go back into class, and then they break out of class again. Lucy makes a fetch of herself, and we get to see her run through a series of emotional moments to set the the expressions for the fetch, and uses the fetch to get away and finds this message in blood. But before we get to that, I guess I want to call out, like, there's this bit where Melissa says how people have been calling her and Bracken, and in fairness, more Bracken, because he put himself really like overtly in the line of danger by shoving his arm in that door and getting some damage or whatever. But Lucy as well, seeing them both as heroes, right? And I agree 100%. Like, Lucy's definitely my favorite Kenneteer, and she is that because of her strong sense of justice and her strong desire to be, I mean, she wouldn't frame it this way, but be heroic, like, do good, right? And the more people see her as that, I think that'll be very fun because of her Fey duelist vibe, right? I really think it'll be interesting, like, if she leans into the heroic dynamic, what that will imply for her using this kind of high summer glamour, which is obviously the heroic, glamour vibe, in these like duelist arenas. Like, can you imagine? This is already kind of what she does. She summons her arena and she's like, "This is a battle. Like, I'm the hero, you're the villain. We're gonna duke it out." Classic, comic book fight style. And the more Lucy is seen by people as a hero, and the more she leans into that vibe of the hero, I think the more fun those Fey duels are going to be, and I just think that will be delightful to watch. Wabo asks, "I'm curious what you think of Mr. Sitten throughout this chapter." Interesting. What, asking me and everyone in chat, please feel free to jump into this as well, why this chapter takes place in his class instead of one of the other teachers, one of the newer teachers, or something like that. Why are we with Mr. Sitten here? I think Mr. Sitten does a pretty good job. I mean, there are a few moments. I think there's one moment in particular where we see a bit of that casual racism that Lucy really feels from him. But he also clearly does a few things that are just good classroom management in this tense situation, right? The bit that really comes to mind is as soon as there is a idea that a gun is going to enter the fray, right? Which is from a police officer, but still, he is immediately like, "Everyone get down." And of course, because they're kids, they don't listen. They're like crowding at the window and shit. And he like forcefully puts himself in the line of danger. I mean, not a huge amount of danger, but he gets between the window and the kids specifically to force them to get into a safer position, putting himself somewhat in danger in the process. And that is genuinely a good thing for him to do, right? He doesn't just, I don't know, like he's not, if he wasn't a casual racist, as Izzard did it puts it, says he could be a cool guy if he weren't such an asshole, right? And yeah, that's true. And so to pull that back to the core question that Wabbo's asking, why are we with Mr. Sitten here and not with a different teacher? I do think, I think there's a few things. I think one is the inherent tension between Lucy and Mr. Sitten really is very juicy in a situation where she has to do something that outside of the practitioner world makes no sense, right? Which is go out and be leave what is functionally akin to an active shooter situation, right? Leave the classroom, which is of course not what a teacher acting in good faith would want a student to do in the real world, because that's wild, right? Of course that's wild. But Lucy obviously has this practicey reason that Mr. Sitten can't and would never understand. And so that leads to this nice level of tension between Lucy and Mr. Sitten, which is exacerbated by the existing tension between them, that is just very fun, I guess, for us as audience members. Like, it adds an extra level to the fact that she has to sneak out of his class twice or three times, and there's this base level of annoyance between them, or between them. Yeah, I guess it is between them. From both sides, there's a level of annoyance with the other that already exists in their dynamic that makes it especially juicy. Like, from Mr. Sitten's perspective, this is another mark against Lucy, and he doesn't sort those marks into categories based on race in his head, I don't think, but I'm sure there's that underlying thing of, like, somewhere in the back of his head, there's probably a thought of course it's Lucy that's the one that is being disruptive and doing this stuff. And I think that's just, again, another level of tension that makes this situation especially juicy for us as a reader, right? Yeah. So that's my answer. So yeah, the message in blood, calling out Lucy and Verona is fun. The fact they're dead animals obviously is not as fun, but it does ratchet up the stakes, I suppose, of this. Yeah, there's this interesting moment where Lucy kind of recognizes there is part of a diagram in this, right? Kind of possibly accidentally a diagram. And again, it just obviously, reading this chapter through for the second time, we know that this situation is mostly resolved by the end of the chapter, right? But it really adds to this rising tension of, okay, shit is happening. Like, we need to put a stop to the family man immediately because the latent knotting and power around him is just getting to be too much. Yeah, as Elliot would put it.
Oh no, shit's getting real now.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, things are really popping off around town, and so it's time for them to take action. Basically, we jump forward into later in the day, and the city is descending into chaos, and there's only one creature who can stand up to the might of the family man, and it's of course the trenchcoat mouse, who gets a beautiful little moment here. The sheer relief I felt when the trenchcoat mouse was not allied with the family man was like, oh, thank God, we don't have to ditch this wonderful character. Yeah, question for chat here. The trenchcoat mouse offers roadkill to Lucy here, right? And also confirms they're not allied to the family man. What is the trenchcoat mouse thinking here? What's the vibe? Because the vibe I got from it is the trenchcoat mouse is trying to help. Like, is that wild to think? The trenchcoat mouse is here trying to help the only way it knows how, which for some reason is offering roadkill to Lucy. I don't know what that roadkill is meant to be, like a power source or a gift, like maybe some kind of cursed item or like magical item. I don't know, but I loved it. I thought it was wonderful, and I love the trenchcoat mouse. What's this voice clip? Maybe this is appropriate.
Woo! Yeah. Go team.
Yeah, go team. Go team. Trenchcoat mouse should be on the team, I guess is what Elliot's trying to say there. So yeah. I fucking love the trenchcoat mouse. And every time we see the trenchcoat mouse and they're not actively shitty and evil, makes me very happy. Because as soon as that happens, I know I'm not going to find them as fun anymore. And I just want them to be as fun as they are for all time. Snowdrop's Tiny Fan calls out, which I think is a great point, about the trenchcoat mouse and the roadkill, that it reminds her of cats dropping dead mice on your pillow, which, yes, very, very much is the vibe, right? Cats, like, that cat thinks it's trying to be helpful. And that's delightful. Like, it's so sweet. What a sweet trenchcoat mouse. Yeah. Murphstrike makes a great point as well. They say, also, putting on the shorts, like, the trenchcoat mouse is trying to be helpful and do what they want. He's just bad at it. Like, yeah, to pull it back to what we were talking about before with Bracken, like, very helpful. Like, doesn't quite do it in the way that you want them to, but their heart's in the right place. And so that's why I think actually Melissa should date the trenchcoat mouse. Is that what I'm saying? Probably not. But I do like the trenchcoat mouse. And let's move on. So yeah, they kind of, Lucy follows the family man's family men and finds this kind of base of operations that they have here, and has a brief conversation with some of the others outside, and turns out Miss has been captured, which is interesting. And Lucy obviously is kind of like, what the heck? Because, we as the readers are also like, isn't Miss's whole vibe that she can slip away from that stuff? Clearly not the case. Something's gone wrong here, right? Yeah, and Snowdrop's Tiny Fan also points out, like, this is the first time I think we've seen Miss in a situation where she's taking, like, physical pain, right? And that's rough. That's you really, knowing the kind of frailty and fragileness of Miss, I suppose, the fact that we know there is a real frailty to her, and her getting hurt in this situation is just like it really just makes your skin crawl, right? So of course Lucy is ready to jump in and fight, but before she can spring her plan, a plan gets sprung on her, and she gets caught and kind of drawn into this fight in a way that she was not intending. I like this line. There's this bit where when she's about to, get fought by this person, she thinks of a lesson that Gilkey taught her about fighting Fae, which is if you face the unpredictable, don't be predictable. And it's a great lesson. Like, it clearly keeps her out of the clutches of this blurry dude, the blurry guy, for a while, which is wonderful. And I loved, and I have loved in these past Lucy chapters that we've got, this kind of run of Lucy chapters, Gilkey's advice and tutelage has really felt very present in the way Lucy approaches situations, right? In fact, we had, I think it was last chapter, it might have been the chapter before, that situation where they were going into the fight with grandfather and Lucy were going into the fight with the family men who were being signaled, right? The way that Lucy's mentors feel so tangible in her mind in these situations is just really powerful writing, right? Like Gilkey, the evoking Gilkey's tutelage here to help her survive longer or avoid this guy longer in this fight. It really lands. You really feel it, and it really adds this just very strong tragic vibe to any time it happens, because of course the one thing that unites all of Lucy's past mentors is their demise, and it's fucking tragic every time. Like, oh yeah, you're using these great techniques that you learned from Gilkey or from John or whatever, but of course the undercurrent of that is, they're not around anymore to keep teaching you. I don't know. Every time it happens, I'm just hit by like a really strong. It really just emotionally lands for me. So yeah, this creepy guy grabs Lucy, the blurry dude, and despite her throwing a bunch of curses at him, he doesn't really get slowed down much, and he we see this curse, this nightmare curse that Lucy tries to stick him with, get bounced back to her. And that's rough. I mean, it's just rough stuff. Yeah, actually, interestingly, I feel like this is the first time. I'm trying to think. Have we seen any other moments where a curse has been reflected back at Lucy like this? I mean, we obviously have known that it could happen, but I don't think we've actually seen it before, tangibly. And it really, I mean, like, it's terrifying, right? Like, this nightmare curse that Lucy throws is horrifying to see. And again, it really makes me feel bad for everyone that Lucy sticks with her curses of like, this is so horrifying. Yeah, I mean, like, all's fair in fights like this, but when we see it, when the Kenneteers, or Lucy specifically, gets a taste of her own medicine, it really stops. It makes me stop and think like, damn, this stuff is horrible. And then, Lucy bounces it back again at him, so that's almost certainly worse the next time around. Tajid points out that we saw a bounce back from Mr. Crying Cold Tears back that long time ago. That's when Zed was still not a. That was Zed's music dude, right? Like a long time ago. Anyway, so yeah, wow, good times. Oh yeah, when Melissa stole Verona's bag. That's right. So it was after the Zed fight at the party. That's right. Yeah. In fact, that exact moment was referenced earlier this chapter when they're talking about how it's still the talk of all the apps in town, which is a lot of hectic stuff has happened in Kennet. You would think there's a bit more stuff to worry about, but no, I guess not. Anywho, reinforcements start to arrive. The tide kind of starts to turn. And then, of course, Verona arrives, and all the remaining combatants from the other side run off scared because they're terrified of Verona, and they think, don't want to deal with this. But before Verona gets there, as she's kind of arriving, there's this moment where Lucy thinks to herself, I can't let Verona see me sucking. I've got to do this right. This would be one hell of a way to get... This would be a hell of a one to get stuck on me at the wrong moment. Talking about a curse, of course, but... The the thought of, I can't let Verona see me sucking, so I've got to do this right. I just think is, yeah, like a bit toxic. But it's interestingly, it's classic both of them, right?
Classic Verona.
But also,
Classic Lucy.
but, and that's the thing that I think is so interesting about it to me is like it is classic for both of them to the way that they engage with each other is so needing to be strong, right? And that's what really stuck out to me about this when Lucy thought it is. It's like this really interesting, dynamic they have of not being able to be weak with each other, needing to be strong so that they can kind of prove to each other that they're strong enough to, to carry out the things that they want implicit permission from each other to do. And I don't know, like it's troubling. And I don't think it always used to be like this before. I feel like they used to be able to be a bit more vulnerable in some of these situations. But maybe it's because there have been more times of things like Lucy asking for permission from Verona to be able to operate in the Undercity, or, things like that where, or similarly, Verona asking for permission from Lucy to be able to operate solo in the Undercity, where they kind of feel like they need to prove to each other that they can do it. And if they show too much weakness or something, then that's like them failing in that proof. I don't know, but whatever it is, it really, on one level, it feels sad that that's what their relationship has to it. But on the other level, it's kind of nice that they're both on the same page about it. Like even in the ways that they have sometimes toxic or problematic mindsets towards their relationship with each other, at least they're on the same page about that. So, that's something, I guess. They're on the same wavelength. Anyway, they wrap up this fight, and then we cut to the next day, and the Kennet strike team is about to attack. They have intel from the BSW, and they, pretty easily fight their way past the guards, overpower the family man's defenses, and kind of turn their attention to him. And again, the BSW, like such a powerhouse, the Bitterstreet Witch, because earlier, we found out about the kind of shell game that the family man plays with where he stays, and it really felt like impossible or not immediately possible to be able to do this kind of thing where they just send in the strike team. Like it felt like they didn't really have a good way to do that. It felt like it was out of the realms of possibility, and suddenly through the allegiance with the BSW, it's just kind of opened a whole new avenue for them because of how powerful her level of precognition is. And I love that. And I love how it turns it from something that seems insurmountable to something that is relatively trivial as just a great marker of like how powerful it is to be making connections with people. And that's something that I think jumps out in the next chapter we talk about as well. Just like making connections, it's a good way to go about it. Yes. Oh, sorry. I'll play the
Classic Avery.
It is a classic Avery move. I was sitting on that classic Avery. You're right. It's the right time for it. Thank you. I'm easily impressed. But yeah. It is a classic. It's a classic Avery move, and it's one that clearly works. So yeah, the Kennetys leverage their allegiances and connections and lay curses at the family man's feet, rendering him, in all senses of the word, impotent. And thus not killing him, but really taking down his effectiveness. I do like the combo of Nicolette and the BSW. I'm excited to see more of that and see how BSW, I guess, stabilizes with a bit more influence from Nicolette. I think is, it's a great idea. It's we were talking about a few weeks ago. We were talking about the idea of the Kennetys really need to pull in their connections more for this stuff because they just can't handle it themselves, as they seem to be aware. And yeah, this is a great example of that. Nicolette and the VSW will be a real powerhouse combo, and I think that's wonderful. Although Nicolette is currently working for Musa, so there's a bit of chin scratching on that one, but I'm sure it will work out. But then the other obvious kind of cost to this maneuver that they pull off is they're at least on some level allying themselves with the foreman, right? Which is something that Lucy at least thought about not being, acceptable. Like the foreman being somebody that they would need to remove sooner rather than later. So yeah, I mean, obviously we don't know what the terms of the family man, being the hammer to kind of squash the forces of the foreman. The foreman and family man really sound very similar, so I apologize if I'm mixing them up, but we don't know what the cost is of the foreman being the hammer to smash the family man after they kind of make him very impotent here. We don't know what the terms of that deal are, but it is kind of, yeah. I guess it's a compromise, and that's good in some ways because it is what they need to be doing, but also, inherently there's a level of being unsatisfied with the compromise, right? Lapsed classicist pulls out. Hold on, this is a long comment. Let me just read it. Yes. This chapter, it's Miss has been talking about her, how Kenneth, her vision for Kenneth, and the analogy of Kenneth as her child has really been brutalized, and Miss was talking about it this chapter, right? And it feels like the connections that the Kennetys are able to bring to the table is what stabilizes that and turns it into not exactly what Miss was thinking about, but but just this new, possibly more sustainable, more connected model, although albeit more connected to the practitioner world, which obviously again is a compromise. Mirthstrike pulls out like back when the Kennedys were first asking permission to have Zed and Bree and I think Nico also kind of come into the town and help out with stuff, and there was such a strong negative reaction to that. And then we had, obviously they helped out more with summer break, with the night of the contest, and that was good. And now it seems like it's being built more into the foundations of the way that they're bargaining, that they have these resources that are connections, that are a genuine resource that can be kind of leveraged. Fun chapter. This obviously comes to the end of our string of 4 Lucy chapters or whatever it was. I'm glad that the chapters that I'm covering solo are all the Lucy chapters, because it was just 3, wasn't it? It was just 3 Lucy chapters. But I love Lucy, and I'm just so glad that we got a run of really strong, compelling Lucy chapters that are just fantastic. They're always just so fun. And that will take us in. Well, actually, I want to respond to something that I'm easily impressed has just said, which is the fact that the family man was dealt with so quickly. I disagree with that. I think it could have been longer, sure, of course, but these past 3 chapters were Lucy's dealing with family man, and the sheer speed at which all of the family man stuff had been ratcheting up. I think Lucy needed to deal with it quickly. You know what I mean? Like the part of the reason that these 3 chapters are so strong, I think, is because Lucy needing to deal with it and trying to deal with it in part, or trying to deal with it and not being able to deal with it fully before Verona came back, is, I think, part of what makes it so compelling. The fact that it needs to be dealt with quickly, the fact they need to make compromises, they need to get BSW involved, they need to get the foreman involved, leverage Nicolette. Like, I don't think Lucy would have done that if they had more time and a kind of softer situation to deal with. But that's kind of the whole point, right? Like, Lucy needed to be pushed into a situation where she would be able to leverage those connections more, because I think that's what leads to a better and more stable version for Kenneth, and a better and more stable balance between Kenneth above and below. Like, I remember the start of these Lucy chapters dealing with the BSW, I was so worried that they weren't going to be willing to offer any actual concessions to the Undercity, because they kind of saw themselves as above it all in many ways. But Lucy needing to make those compromises, I think, will lead to a better, more stable version of Kenneth, and I think that's why it had to be so chaotic. Zikri makes a really good point. Like, Lucy's win here came from her organizing the community, like 100%. I just think, like, it's a different way for Lucy to win a fight that is tangential to what she always has been doing, but it is a progression of it in a really compelling way. Just good stuff. I really like how it all played out. Let's get into our next chapter, where we've got an interlude, 15Z, and we're with Gilkey, which Did anyone expect a Gilkey interlude? I know I didn't, but gosh, what a interlude we got, huh? So yeah, obviously impressed. Expected a Gilkey interlude. Well done. You get the points. Congratulations. Yeah, Gilkey awakens, ensures he hasn't killed anything too sentient while he's been asleep, and heads out to a council meeting, first stopping to just grab Avery on the way. And yeah, like, the strength of Wapo's interludes really is the way that we're able to get into somebody else's head. Obviously, like, that's what they're for. And I think the thing that is so compelling about interludes in the other verse is the fact that we have these other interludes where we get in the heads of others, and you just see always the unifying theme between them is how much effort it is just to exist as an other in this universe, right? Like, that's the running theme, one of the running themes throughout this interlude is it takes so much conscious effort from Gilkey to just be. And even with that, he is degenerating and he has, something between 30 and 50 years or whatever, right? Of which he's already used up 20. And when the overarching themes of class struggles and, the mistreatment or objectification of others are so prevalent in this story, being able to have an other interlude and have it so strongly demonstrate to us, like, just being as an other is a struggle. It really just helps all those things land so well. Yeah. The other bit to it is something that we've seen a lot as a theme throughout this story, obviously, especially from our villains of Marcy and Charles, but also somewhat from Verona and from a number of characters, Seth, is this theme of, like, when you're in such shitty circumstances where just existing is so much effort and so, like, grinds you down so much, you really would do anything just for a shot to change your lot in life, right? Even if it doesn't have that much of a great chance of success, it's just like, even just rocking the boat is a good alternative to just being in a frustrating situation. And so every time we get an interlude like this, like Gilkey's, it just is so... I just find that theme coming through so strong in such a compelling way, and I just think that's wonderful. Vice versa pulls out the lines of how, the amount of energy that Gilkey spends just existing compared to the amount that he regains from resting is so disproportionate. Again, just to land this point home of, like, there's no way that you can sustain yourself. It's just not sustainable being Gilkey. And obviously we'll get to why he makes the decisions that he makes at the end of the chapter as a result, right? The other thing that comes up through this entire chapter is Gilkey being distracted or yearning for situations of parents having fun with children, which happens a few times. Vice versa points this out as well. There's the moment at the park. There's obviously the relationship between Thea and Otis that he kind of yearns for, which obviously reminds him of a parental or kind of caretaker relationship. We'll get into the kind of tragedy of Gilkey when he goes back to his home, but yeah, it's sad. It's sad stuff. So yeah, Gilkey finds Avery, who is with Nora, and Gilkey pulls her away from her fun almost date. And while I'm still on the Avery, I'm not fully on the Avery and Nora train. I don't think. I do think they're very cute. They're so awkward together. Like, their sheer awkwardness between the two of them. Like, Avery is the less awkward one in this relationship, and it's just delightful that Avery gets to be that. So yeah, it's good stuff. We get a little bit of fun Nora awkwardness after Avery is left, which is just so adorable. But yeah, like, Avery is nice to Gilkey, and he repays it many times in this chapter. So again, more proof that the classic Avery move,
Classic Avery,
of just being nice to people continues to pay off, right? So yeah, we go to the council meeting, and Thea is kind of attempting to defend the mess that she's made. And yeah, I mean, I guess the council seems more upset by the fact there's a bit of a mess to clean up than they are by the fact that Thea was kidnapping and harvesting. Is that the right word? Maybe. Harvesting children, which is very fucked. Avery seems to be the only person who cares what she's doing here, which is worrying. Yeah, like Thea says. So what Thea says is, I had to capture the children. They were aware or close to it. I would have managed that awareness, drained some power, and let them go. And then she says bodies are inconvenient, which presumably is her excuse for not murdering children. So great. The fact that the cleanup would be inconvenient, that's a real compelling reason, Thea. But yeah, I mean, it's not even a point of discussion. Avery's the only person who like calls out, hey, this is shitty. And kind of gets shut down by Anne by like, oh, Karma will deal with that. Like, we don't have to worry about it. Which is obviously not true. Obviously ridiculous. It's so passive and completely washes the hands of the entire situation, which is classic practitioner. Let's not worry about it. Yeah, just worrying. Very worrying and very, like, yeah. I still am holding out some level of hope that Otis is not a piece of shit. And just every time we get a scene like this where no council members question some horrific shit that happens, it just becomes more and more clear that that's not the case, right? Yeah. We get a nice Otis moment where he clearly cares about Thea, but doesn't care that she's doing horrifying shit, but does kind of care about what she thinks of him, and like he seems like he is a good and caring mentor to her, and Gilkey kind of picks up on that. But it's not... I guess the point I would want to make to Otis is it's not being a good mentor if you let your mentee do horrifying shit. Like, just come on. Anyway, yeah, it's a fun moment. It's a fun scene. We get some good fun bits.
Classic Snowdrop.
Yeah, we get some classic Snowdrop moments. Classic Snowdrop defending herself, which is great. And then we get what is maybe the most compelling and interesting mystery that we've had since figuring out who the conspirators were. And I'm pretty tempted to add a prediction category to our Pale Predictor spreadsheet, which is, what is the council planning for Halloween? This really jumped out to me on my first read through. So let's read the line. It's the final line of this segment. Florin says, speaking of making nice, if we're done with Thea's plea for assistance, shall we move on to other council business? We're a few days into October and Halloween is at the end of this month, ... and that's where it leaves. Now, there are a few possible reads of this, but the fact that Florin starts with the phrase, speaking of making nice, implies that it's something to do with making nice, and really all it can be is a Halloween party. Like, what else could it possibly be? So, the council is throwing a Halloween party is just the wildest thing, but also it can't be anything else, right? Like, what else could it possibly be? I don't know. It could be something practice related. I'm easily impressed says making offerings to the spirits on Halloween, which is possibly true, but like, nah, it's a Halloween party, I'm sure of it. And that begs the question, what costume is everybody going to wear to the Halloween party? And I encourage you all to leave your thoughts in chat, and I'll pull out some good answers as we continue, because I just am so excited by the possibility of what costumes people would wear to the council Halloween party. Oh yeah, Lapsed Classist says Avery convinces Nora to go as the Eco Witch cartoon from Scooby-Doo, which is great, of course. I feel like a Scooby-Doo costume would just work really well inherently. I feel like Otis could do some kind of like Magic School Bus costume vibe, and that would be pretty funny. Oh shit, I'm easily impressed makes a great point, which is we have the Tearaway Kid in the story now, and he is canonically an expert at making incredibly compelling costumes. So, I mean, like, if anything, that just makes me more excited for the Halloween party that the council is planning, because Avery is going to get the Tearaway Kid, hopefully, to make her a sick, kick-ass fucking costume. It'll be hilarious. Yeah. So that's what I'm most excited for, I think. Moving on, Avery delivers a status report to Thunder Bay, and Gilkey interprets, more or less. Yeah, and this was really interesting to me, because obviously, in the past, when we've been speaking to Thunder Bay, we've been in Avery's head, mostly, I think. I think we had one moment of Verona as well, but mostly in Avery's head. And And so we've just kind of taken Gilkey at his word for what Thunder Bay says and means here. But it really, this segment gave me a real strong impression that, like, Thunder Bay is kind of transactional in how in how they communicate, and seems kind of cold, whereas Gilkey is any warmth that we have read from Thunder Bay in the past feels like it now is like Gilkey's spin on it, right? There's this moment where Gilkey says, I think you'll be able to count on protection and help from the Lord. If it comes to that, it's only fair. And the Lord responds with with what is explicitly called out as not a definitive statement, more like a consideration of like, the impression it gave me is Gilkey says that and the Lord is kind of like, yeah, probably, like, I'm still thinking it over. And Gilkey doesn't reveal that, right? Gilkey doesn't say that the Lord is mulling it over. Gilkey is kind of being almost like speaking with warmth and friendliness from the Lord to then kind of like force Thunder Bay's hand to be a bit nicer, you know? Yeah, I don't know. It's just very interesting. And it kind of makes me worry that Thunder Bay is treating these relationships a bit more transactionally than we might have thought in the past, I suppose. But yeah, Gilkey heads back to his birthplace and rests there, and kind of rests surrounded by this tragedy that he's completely disconnected from, which is tragic. Yeah, I don't know, like, Gilkey's in a really interesting position here, where he is intentionally deciding to not engage with the person that he very clearly was, right? But doesn't want to define himself as, which I think is a very interesting thought for him to take. Like, he knows that there is more information about who he is in this house, and he could find out more about it. But but it's not who he is, I guess. Me saying that it's who he is wrong, because Gilkey is his own creature, and he doesn't want to be defined by the fact that he is a remnant of somebody who did something possibly bad, right? That shouldn't define Gilkey, and I think that's just very beautiful. And there's just like a beautiful tragic vibe to this whole scene. We've got some more costumes in chat, which I'm going to use to pull myself out of the tragic vibes of this moment. Nicole with the abyssal cow, lapsed classist pulls out. That could be a good costume. And maybe that's related. Maybe the reason Nicole got the abyssal cow is to make some kind of costume, like a milkmaid costume or something, right? I can definitely see that. Yeah, I'm as impressed. It pulls out an interesting thought of, like, Thunder Bay's indifference and transactional nature makes it a bit more sus as why she pushed for Avery to be let in and be a part of the council, and then Jaso calls out, like, Avery was let in, and then within half a month is spying on the rest of the council. So that's probably why. So yeah, I mean, like, I hadn't kind of connected that there's such a clear transaction in Thunder Bay's mind to it, but that's what it seems like from this chapter, and that's kind of disappointing. Like, I kind of liked Thunder Bay, and this makes me like them a lot less. Anyway, we get a very interesting final scene here where Gilkey leaves Thunder Bay on this mission and heads to a Fae market.
Leaving Thunder Bay to dance with the Fae.
And again, I just want to call out, Elliot didn't know what this chapter was about. And that is wild to me, that he predicted that this is what happens. He must have, like, he told me that he didn't know, but maybe he was just lying, because that's so specific. I don't know. Or Elliot is the bitter street witch, is the other explanation. Who knows? Anyway, Fae market, as usual, horrifying, disgusting, captivating, all three at once. And it's very fun. Gilkey is here for info on Marcy and gets more than he expected because she is actually here, and Gilkey confronts her. And damn, it's good to see Maricica again, right? Like, immediately, Maricica is just so compelling as a villain. Like, this is the first time we've seen Maricica since that night, and shit, it is delightful. I love how clearly Maricica has not been able to, I don't know, like, Maricica hasn't won. She's so clearly still trying to escape the fallout of that night, and maybe Gilkey has finally set her free from that, but she really just felt like, Like there was no victory in her mannerisms, right? Maybe as a way to encourage Gilkey to help her more. I don't know, but she just hasn't had any time to revel in her complete and utter victory in Kennet, and I just think that is pretty fun. Now, the reason for that is because she was being chased by this thing that in the comments it was speculated, and I think this makes sense to be the kind of hunting dog that Durocher set on her. She is now freed from that. That is maybe the reason that she was keeping away from Kennet, to not, fuck with Charles and all that shit while she was being chased by this big monster. That is no longer the case anymore. So, yeah. Does that mean Marcy is going to be headed back to Kennet? Maybe. I look forward to seeing the impacts of this. But of course, the other impact of this is Maricica offers Gilkey a deal to, free him, is part of the words that she uses. And he accepts it. I mean, he compromises a bit, but he does accept the deal, which therefore means, what is Gilkey gonna be next? Is Gilkey still gonna be in the story? Is this an exit, an exit from the story for Gilkey? Maybe. Hard to say specifically, because Maricica doesn't. She speaks about as tangibly as we can expect her to, which is somewhat tangibly, but really doesn't give us all the info. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like when Gilkey is, has this antidote and is no longer so defined by the fact that he is a corrupting, poisoning, toxic force. I guess the other thing to point out here is I really got the strong sense that if Avery wasn't nice to Gilkey today and in the past, he would have just completely helped Maricica, right? Avery's kindness is the only thing that kind of makes him not want to do that. So again, thumbs up to Avery. Being kind really pays off. Yeah, it's good stuff. Zikri points out an interesting point of Maricica loses her wings here, and it's almost as if that's a step towards Maricica not being a Fae anymore. Lapsed Classicist points out we're in the same arc as Thea wanting to snip the wings of the souls of people as a horrific loss, and obviously Maricica loses her wings here, and there's a nice parallel there. Yeah, some real fun stuff here. I haven't been pulling out predictions for these episodes because I'm engaging with chat so much here. I feel like it's not the right time, but this chapter really leaves us ripe for making more predictions. So if you do want to make some more predictions, you can find the Pale Predictor sheet in the show notes down below. But yeah, I really feel like this is freeing Maricica from the thing that was keeping her away from Kennet, which means we might see Maricica stepping more actively back into the story. We might get some more Marcy showdowns, which I am very keen for. So yeah, good shit. No discussion question this week. We'll be back probably for a regular recording next week, although we've got our reflecting episode as well, so we might need to play it a bit by ear. Stay tuned in the Discord for more announcements of when the live recording is, because we need to kind of figure out the schedule for it, because also we're so close to Christmas now that time is getting really hard to manage. But yeah, if you're listening to this not live and you want to find all that information, you can check out the Discord, which is at doofmedia.com/Discord. But yeah, man, 2 great chapters. I've really enjoyed the series of Lucy chapters, and the Gilkey interlude was just a real highlight. Like one of those interludes where you're just like, this is just peak interlude. Just delightful shit. Anywho, thanks everyone for joining. Oh, actually, one more thing to announce. If you're listening to this later, it's going to be too late, sorry, but if you're in the live channel right now, we have announced our holiday live stream thing. We're going to be live watching the Star Wars Holiday Special, and I think that's in the Discord. I'm pretty sure Elliot posted an announcement about it. Let me just check. In the announcements channel, yes. We'll be doing a group watch of the Star Wars Holiday Special, and also, because we've been watching Shrek, we'll be watching the Shrek the Halls holiday thing. I mean, that's only like, I don't know, like 20 or 30 minutes or something, so hopefully it won't be too painful. We'll see. But if you want to join that, the announcements channel has more details, and I think we'll be posting more. That's like in a few hours later today. It's in like 3 or 4 hours, so stay tuned for that. And if you want to support all the great shows on the Doof Media Network, you can go to patreon.com/doofmedia. I won't give any teasers or anything, but there's just some cool stuff coming up, so stay tuned, I guess. I don't think I can give any more info than that. Of course, if you want to support Wildbow, who does a lot of great stuff for us, obviously writing these stories, but also just kind of being an active part of the community, asking fun, prompting questions and things like these live chats, like very, very good stuff. Make sure you support Wildbow. Go to patreon.com/Wildbow and give him some support. And with that, it's the end of the show. So, see you around.